Okay, good afternoon, everybody. We'll start our session just after 2 minutes at 10:40 a.m., starting with Dr. Medani Bhandari. And then we have 3 papers, starting second, the paper presenters are Rajesh Bista and Conghe Song. Then we have Nirmal, Dr. Nirmal Kumar Raut. I think I can see him here, and Dr. Bhubaneswor Dhakal. So yeah, 10:40 we'll start, and maybe I can request Dr. Medani Bhandari if you want to share your slide. And all the presenters, for the sake of our time, will get no more than 12 minutes so that we can manage this session. Thank you, Professor Bhandari. So Professor Bhandari will present on a landslide associated to unplanned road construction and inevitable problem in Nepal. Okay, Dr. Bhandari, the floor is yours.
Unmute. So, and then where is the screen? Okay, start video.
Oh, the slideshow. Yeah.
Okay. Now right. I got it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Professor Bhandari. And as I said, like 12 minutes.
Okay.
12 minutes.
Okay. So, should I begin?
Yeah, sure. You can start.
Okay. So, my title is Landslide Associated to Unplanned Road Construction and Inevitable Problem in Nepal. But I need to tell beforehand that this presentation is not a research presentation. It's like an observation presentation. So nothing is, whatever I have mentioned here, none of them are my production. It's just taken somewhere else. So I need to acknowledge that before I move. So I will talk a little bit about the disaster, but we don't need to because everybody knows. And then after mine, I think the third presentation is about the dissertation and earthquake. So that the most of stuff will cover on that one. So I will be very quick and then just go on this way. So disaster we can see it everywhere, and my just focus will be how the road, unplanned road, is making worse. But before I go there, I will talk a little bit slightly like a theory because we need to have a foundation. So disaster, it came from the Greek word, so it's a bad or evil star. They begin on that way. So always when there is a disaster, that means always bad. So, and then if we go to the landslide side, landslide occurs automatically by natural, but also mainly in Nepal or the fragile ecosystem, it is the anthropogenic. And in Nepalese context, it is unplanned, this development thrust everybody is having right now. So I'm not reading these all. So there are two types of major disaster like a anthropogenic disturbance and natural disasters. So, but now, because traditionally we had these 6 category, but nowadays another main disaster is induced due to the climate change, and that is directly related with all the development scenario, and then all whatever we say the climate change impact. So that is also introducing the disasters. Again, there are varieties and then definitions, but I'm not going to repeat these definitions. So in landslide in Nepal is not only the natural or it happens in nature, but it disturbs in a society. So it is totally associated with the social system. So it disturbs the whole living pattern. Because the many people are suffering that every year we lost many people. So it's nature and then culture, or it has a socio-economic side as well. No need to explain more, but the landslide and flooding are closely related in Nepalese context, because when there is the flood, there is a landslide, and when there is a landslide, there is a flood. So it's vice versa. So just one example, in terms of the ecological risks, Nepal is always in top. And then in terms of flooding, Nepal is belongs to the 10th among world in the world context. So it's a very fragile ecosystem. So, and then it is associated with the river system and then high mountain. So the landslide occurs and then river blocked and then get the flooding and then we lost a lot of life and the property and everything. So main areas this is taken from the portal data. So these that is the scenario how these landslide events are were in September 2020, but it happens most of the time. So this actually map is not one snapshot of map, but it gives the general scenario of every year actually. So my focus is the unplanned road. So what is happening right now in Nepal is that if you travel mostly in the rural area and then this mid-mountain area, everywhere you can see these excavator backhoes. They are running everywhere. There is always backhoe, always excavator. So they are digging and making road. So there is like a competition to reach people really want the road in their every and each house. So they don't care what will be the consequences. So, and then by that, the water resources pattern is totally damaged. And also in many places, the source of the water is gone. So now they have a road, but they have to migrate from that area. So it's like a very, I don't know, it's a super critical situation is going on, and every leader, they want to show something. So the showcase is a road. So there's making road, no EIA, no evaluation, no soil testing, nothing. Just they use the excavator and then dig. So that is what is happening.
Dr. Bhandari, just to tell you, like you have 5 minutes.
Okay. Yeah, okay. That's enough. So now the major part is gone. So how we see Yasin in travel. So I was just going to Muktinath and I saw this one. So you can see these two pictures. Is the how is the landslide condition, and you see this excavator is doing this, and what is what happening on the side. And then you can see on this one also, is this all the road, and but no, all are unplanned. This was the Nirdesh, Nepal and his friend did this research long ago, but still this scenario still exists and continues. It's the same from the Nirdesh ji. And then, so I think everybody heard about the Melanche disaster. So it is also one, actually is a dangerous example, what happened in Melanche. So basically this dozer, we say this excavator digging the road has a really negative connotation in hill area, particularly in hill area. But nobody cares it because everybody needs road in their house, particularly in their house. And these leaders, they want to show something, and this is the good way to show. But here, this is very interesting. The one guy, actually, I take from this one of the newspaper, and then there was a comment, and that guy, the comment from Kapil Dhikal, he wrote that without sound engineering, dozare विकासले कसरी विनाश निम्ति हुन्छ भन्ने उदाहरण गतिको घटनाले फेरि प्रमाणित गरेको छ. That means the dozer brought development is destroying the natural setting. So there is no too much mud flow in that tributary. Wherever we see that the dozer, they dig and then throw the mud, and that takes the flows down, and even stop river. So it's kind of crazy situation is going on. So basically that is just the general scenario. As I told early in the beginning, that these all are whatever I have just shown is our secondary information. Nothing is mine. Now I should say a little bit my part. These are mine. These are my books. Sakib already have seen some of them, but not all. But I will show another few of them. This is the book I am working on now on landslide and unplanned road construction. So that is just the basic concept. I am just still working on basic concept. So these are the other books. And so how these disasters can be minimized. There are so many theories, there are so many documents, policy, actually, how we can do that. But for that, there should be the proper rules. There should be a political will. But there is no political will is to make a development, and development is happening without considering nature. So I don't know where it will end. It's kind of very, very devastating. So how we can do that is we people, the local people need to be aware that what is the meaning of development, whether the meaning of development is to have a car in front of the house and every house need to have a road, or we need to make a balance in with the nature and then do development with let's say Sakil, you use the SDG example on your context, but here actually we need to have a sustainable way to develop also. In the name of development, we are destroying. So that's not a development what is going on in Nepal. So what to do is that I always say that we need to have a feeling that giving back to the society, the feeling of the togetherness, but not within the women, but we need to have a the feeling of the togetherness with the nature. So we can protect the nature and we can do the development. So I also say Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam is that the all living creatures are our relatives. So if we have a feeling, if we can reach that type of a feeling, then at least we do development, we need a development, but with the development, we can have a harmony with nature as well. And then also if we consider that our living beings have our own relationship, then we need to live, but also we need to let the other species, other plant, and then the natural ecosystem need to exist. Thank you. So this picture is a long ago, the picture when I was very young, energetic, with my wife, and then we were doing campaigning, save the nature, and then we were also doing plantation and blah, blah. And then now, yeah, still doing the same thing. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Bhandari, for your presentation. I can see just one comment from Kader Newpan. You can look at the comment. He's just mentioning that contract related to construction is generally associated with the institutional corruption in Nepal. So
absolutely,
maybe, just
absolutely,
an observation
absolutely.
from his end.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
No
okay,
question
Dr.
on that one. Already, even early in the first presentation, Dr. Swarnim Wagle also mentioned that how the corrupted part is going on, and then how the leaders, the cunning leaders, are doing their business. So yeah, absolutely, yes, I agree, totally agree.
And thank you, Dr. Bhandari. And we'll see, like at the end of our session, if we still have time, we can, direct some questions toward you. Right now, just for the sake of time, I will invite the second presenter. Actually, we have two names here, Rajesh Bista and Conghe Song. The title of the paper is Does Rural Outmigration Influence Forest Product Use and Household Participation in Community Forest Management? So I can see Rajesh is already, Rajesh, it is you, right? Okay. Okay, all right, Rajesh.
Am I audible?
Yeah, we can see this screen and everything. So it's all yours. Okay.
So I'm audible.
As I say, 12 minutes. Okay, 12 minutes, Rajesh. Okay.
Am I audible?
The presentation. Pardon?
Am I
yeah,
audible?
you're audible. You're audible, Rajesh.
Okay, so am I in presenter mode?
Yeah, I think you're sharing the
so,
screen. You can see the screen. And Rajesh, 12 minutes, okay?
Yeah,
Next.
sure.
Right,
so thank you, Dr. Sakib. Good morning, namaste, and welcome everyone. I am Rajesh Bista. I am PhD candidate at UNC Chapel Hill, and today I am going to present my preliminary finding from my one of my PhD chapters, and I have titled my presentation as Does Rural Outmigrations Influence Forest Product Use and Household Participation in Community Forest Management. So let me start with brief background about the community forestry. Basically, the community forestry is the participatory and decentralized forest governance mechanism, usually practiced in more than 60 countries around the world, and has been managing around 500 million hectares so far. In Nepal, basically community forestry is the part of national forest given to the local community for its protection, management, and utilizations. And initially, community forestry were handed to the community to restore degraded forest area, livelihood support of forest-dependent communities forming community forest user groups, which is self-regulated autonomous institutions. And in such community forest user groups, participation is key for the success of any kind of community forest. And in Nepal, so far we have around 23,000 community forest user groups managing 35% of the national forest, and around 3 million households are directly involved. And in last couple of decades, the forest area in Nepal has been increased in Nepal, mostly as a result of community conservation efforts, as well as secondary successions of forests in abundant agricultural land. And this is the map showing the distributions of community forestry at local administrative level. Similarly, migration is one of the demographic factors affecting environment. In Nepal, data shows that 1 in 5 active age individuals are removed from the place of their birth. And likewise, remittance contribute around 30% of the national GDPs, and more than 50% of the households receive remittance. And Nepal is one of the top 5 remittance recipient countries. And in fact, these are not only the numbers, the existing state of migration rate and remittance in Nepal has a direct impact on livelihood strategies and affect the agricultural land use and community forestry management. And the study found that out migration has contributed in forest recovery. However, there are very few studies that explore the impact of out migrations on the community forestry governance. And the map and the screen is the percentage of absentee populations at local administrative unit. So most of the local administrative unit at Mid-Hill region has higher percentage of absentees. And when the government envisioned the community forestry and plan, out migration was really a rare social phenomenon. And as we heard this morning about the remittance and migrations, it's been one of the major issues. So back in 1990s, the contributions in remittance in GDP is less than 1%, and more than 90% relies on fuel wood for their energy sources. There is less access to the electricity, high dependency on agriculture and forest-based livelihoods. But in recent years, remittance contributions in GDP increased significantly, almost 30%, and fuel wood consumption decreased due to increase in access to the alternative energy such as electricity or LPG. And involvement in agriculture and livestock keeping for livestock also decreased in recent years. So all these number implies that there is a decreasing dependencies on forest and agriculture, mostly due to the remittance economy and migrations. But the community forestry and program have not embraced the ongoing socio-economic change among the rural communities so far. So with this, I have two major objectives. One is to understand how out migration influence forest product use. And the second one is to understand whether the rural out migrations affect the participation in community forestry activities or not. And this is the conceptual framework for the study. So theoretically, the effect of out migration in collective actions in community forestry are mediated by multiple factors, including economic heterogeneity or resource dependencies or participation, size of community, leadership. But there is no such single studies that prescribe the single set of factors that determine the participation of community in forest resource management. And most of the studies on community management of natural resources usually focus on three critical aspects. The first one is the users. And the second one is the physical attributes of the resources. And third one is the institutional arrangement that provide the structure for the interaction between users and resource characteristics. And similarly, migration, which is part of households risk diversification strategy, also interact with all these three aspects, resulting different level of participation outcomes. So we conducted this study in 15 community forest user groups from two mid-hill districts of Nepal. One is Khavre-Palanchok district and one is Thanau. Both districts experiencing significant out migrations in recent years. And the study area had the forest area of around 55%, and more than 65% of the households has the migrants. So we did our questionnaire survey with 415 households and collected 1,264 GPS coordinates of the land parcels. And we used order logistic regression approach to model factors determining the participations in community forestry activities, and used relative important index of multiple forest product to understand how forest product use varies among the households with and without migrants. And this is the map on the screen is the distributions of GPS coordinates for land parcel and households from our study sites. So yeah, so there are different stages of community forestry activities, such as the constitution making, operational plan making, user community formations, forest management or implementations, planning or decision making, and the forest utilizations. But we only consider the participation in forest management and decision making in our study. And since the forest utilizations is the voluntary choice, we try to understand how it differs between households with and without migrants, rather than modeling the participation for forest utilizations. And in both forest management and decision making participation model, we have ordinal outcome variables, that is low, medium, and high. And the bar graph on the right hand side, so the frequency of participation type for forest management and decision making. And we see higher level of participation in decision making compared to the participation in forest management. So based on the theories, or maybe on the based on the field experience and other empirical studies, we consider these following potential predictors to model factors contributing participation in community forestry. As presented in conceptual framework earlier, we conceptualized that the participation in community forestry is the function of user characteristics, resource characteristics, and the institutional characteristics. So I will skip these numbers for the sake of the time. So this descriptive statistics table shows that there is a significant difference between the level of participation in forest management with the number of active populations in household income, agricultural income, and amount of fuel wood use, distance to forest from households, and years of membership. Similarly, there is statistical significant difference between level of participation decision making with the number of active populations, age of household head, and the livestock unit the household owned, and the agricultural income at the household. So these are some of the bar chart for multiple categorical variables. It shows that female household head participate more in forest management activities, and male household head participate more in decision making. Similarly, the ethnic caste group household participate less in decision making and participate more in forest management compared to other caste group. And the training opportunities and positions on executive committee has positive outcomes on participation levels in the community forestry. So from two different logistic regression model, we found that the user characteristics such as household size or social segregation based on caste and occupations were significant factors associated with participation of household in community forestry. And institutional arrangements like a leadership role, training from community forestry positively contribute in participation of households in both decision making and forest management. Similarly, we also found that increase in distance to forest and the longevity of community forestry membership decrease the likelihood of participation in forest management. And remittance does not play a role in participation level of the community forestry activities. So from the relative importance index, we found higher importance index among the households with non-migrants for all kind of forest product compared to the households with migrants. And we found there is no significant difference in important index between households receiving remittance and not receiving remittance. And this is and this table shows the quantity of forest product that individuals on average use or demand. We found no significant difference in fuel wood and fodder demand between the households with and without migrants. But household with remittance demand less fuel wood compared to the households without remittance. And
Yeah.
we found
Rajesh,
that yes,
just to say, like, you have less than 4 minutes.
yeah,
Around
2
3
more
minutes
is enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we found household receiving remittance used higher proportion of liquefied petroleum gas compared to others. And for all kind of forest product, we found the households without migrants relies more on community forestry compared to households with migrants. And the fuel wood consumptions from community forestry decreased by 11%, and fodder use from community forestry decreased by 19% among the households with migrants compared to overall households. So we also found that out-migration has reduced the availabilities of farm labor, which has increased the amount of cropland abandonment. So out of 1,264 geocoded land parcels, 26% of the land were abandoned due to the lack of agricultural labor, mostly caused by the out-migrations. And most of the abandoned land were converted into vegetations or forest land due to the passive successions, which we can see in the graph and in the figures. And the number shows that in 2000 in Tanout district, the forest area was only 54%, which has been increased to 64%. And there is similar trend with the another state sites from the Kabra districts. So with this, here are some of my takeaway points. The first one is the participation in community forestry and forest resource consumptions is directly associated with demographic factors, but they are somehow ignored in community forestry programs and option plan. The second one is the importance of all kind of forest products are high among the households without migrants, and households with migrants are less dependent in community forestry resources compared to households with migrants. And the last one is the ongoing migrations phenomenon has direct implications on agricultural land use, especially the land abandonment and land underutilizations, and have positive feedback effect on forest cover change in rural Nepal. So with this, I would like to end my presentations, and I'll be happy to take any questions and comments.
Thank you, Rajesh. A very nice presentation. I have a couple of questions. Let me go through. The first one from Vishan. He's asking, like, can you speak a little about the institutional variation in community forest governance? Are there differences in terms of management models? Are there variations in property rights arrangements? I can see 3 parts there. Maybe you can go one by one. The first one is, as I said, can you speak a little about the institutional variation in community forest governance? And then are there differences in terms of management models?
So usually, when we talk about the community-based forest management, so there are different modalities within the community-based forest management. So one is the community forest, another one is buffer zone or leaseholds. But within the community forestry, the institutional governance mechanism is somehow same. So there is no variations within the community forestry governance mechanism. But there could be some kind of variation within the community forestry because due to the level of resources they have, or due to the size of the community forestry, or the forest type they own. But in the broader sense, there is no variations in governance within the community forestry. And the second question is, so what's the, okay, I think I can say.
Well, yeah, I think the second question, are there differences in terms of management models? Are there variations in property rights arrangements? Maybe in terms of property rights, you can touch base, Rajesh.
So within the community forestry, there is no variations, both in terms of management models and property right arrangements. So all of those are guided by the same policies. same guidelines and same acts and same regulations. So there is no variations within the community forestry. But if we compare with other different modalities, there is definitely the variations, but which I didn't explain.
Okay, thank you, Rajesh. The second question is, how about bivariate or simultaneous estimation instead of individual estimation? I think it's about your the model that you use. You know, like it's a suggestion like how about bivariate or simultaneous estimation? Have you considered those options, or you just went for individual estimation so far?
I didn't consider those so far, but definitely I will think about that. But for now, I didn't consider about the bivariate or maybe the simulation estimation as the Dr. Hari asked. In fact, yeah, I will have a look on that, but I haven't considered that so far.
Okay, thank you, Rajesh. And the last question before we went to the next presenter is about to please talk a little about the linkage between community forestry and social capital and livelihood communities.
So usually for the success of the community forestry, the social capital is very important. And one of my hypotheses is that due to the outmigrations, there is a weakening state of social capitals, and it will impact the sustainability of the community forestry. So yeah, I have some thoughts to mention in my discussions about this component, but yeah, I didn't have much more explore about this so far.
Okay, and thank you, Rajesh, for trying to address this question. And now I'll invite Dr. Nirmal Kumar Raut to present his paper. You can share your slides, Dr. Raut. And the topic of Dr. Nirmal Kumar Raut's paper is Natural Disaster and Assets Recovery, Empirical Evidence from Nepal's Earthquake.
Is my slide visible?
See, I think still is trying to, now it is visible, Dr. Raut. Okay, and
thank you very much, Dr. Sakib. So this is Nirmal Kumar Raut from Central Department of Economics, Tribhuvan University, Nepal. And this work is kind of supported by Sandy Isimot, which promotes research in development and environmental economics in this region. So let me move on. So as you can say that, as the title itself suggests, that we're talking about assets recovery. So the assets that were lost during the 2015 Nepal earthquake. So when we're talking about assets, we're basically talking about productive assets. So I think that it would be important to have a look why it is important to kind of analyze assets recovery vis-a-vis sort of consumption smoothing or something like that. So if you also look into the literature, so I think that there are scant literature which kind of talks about a recovery of these productive assets, which are really important for these rural households to smoothen their consumption, so which are basically uninsured in developing part of the world. So we wanted to look into the status of these assets 5 years down the line after the earthquake happened, and what's the kind of status of their recovery situation, and what are the factors that sort of affected this recovery process of these rural households. And also from the policy perspective as well, if you look into the policy documents that primarily came out after the 2015 earthquake, you'd see that these policy documents talks very less about this economic recovery, particularly the recovery of productive assets. So I think that that's why it was important to look into this very aspect, so that we could draw attention of the various stakeholders to it. So let me move on. So based on that motivation or background, whatever you want to call it, so we started first looking into whether there really had been impact of this earthquake on the productive assets. Really, it had a damage on these productive assets or not. So we want to look at empirically, and then we want to explore this assets recovery path of the households. Whether the assets growth of these households, particularly you see the rural household or low wealth households pre-earthquake, are their assets growth are convergent or not, or are they moving towards towards equilibrium or not. So that is the second objective that we have. And finally, we also wanted to look into what sort of assets protection strategies these households resorted to, and what were the strategies that were actually effective during the recovery process. So I don't want to talk much about literature. So I went through I had a comprehensive review of literature, and I found a limited evidence, as already talked about, on assets recovery. So whatever studies been done in Nepal after the earthquake happened, these are mostly qualitative studies. So it basically talks about community resilience after this earthquake on several socioeconomic dimensions, including psychological recovery, and other kind of recoveries. So I think in that line, or in that context, this literature, this study would add value. So this is the convergent assets accumulation process that I'm basically talking about. So you imagine a household, moving on to a certain, trajectory in terms of, assets growth. So the shock happens, the stock of assets deplete, all right? And then the growth is sluggish, as you can see. And then if, for example, the household resort to certain assets protection strategies, then some strategies do work and some strategies do not, right? So let us suppose that if the strategy works, then the assets growth path would take this trajectory, and it would be sort of convergent towards this path. This is sort of a counterfactual. What if the disaster did not happen, or what if there was no shock, right? So it will move towards this equilibrium. And if not, if the household do not resort to any sort of protection strategies, or those assets protection strategies the household resorted to did not work basically, or was not effective, then the household, the growth would be along this line C80. So it would be sort of stagnant, and it would be moving towards like low sort of equilibrium level. So this is the basic conceptual framework behind this assets accumulation I'm talking about, or assets growth trajectory I'm talking about. So let me talk briefly about the data that I used. So this is basically, the data that I kind of, resurveyed from the survey that has already been done by, Tribhuvan University after 6 months the earthquake happened in 2015. So what I did was that I kind of, resurveyed 50% of the rural households from that survey, right? So it was around 680 households in 34 rural PSUs from 9 affected districts. So these households were, selected sort of randomly, and yeah, so we had some attrition. So you see, so we have attrition rate of around 9%. So we end up with a kind of 611 households, something like that. And for identification, you see, to sort of look into the impact of the earthquake, we utilize this what is called the modified Mercalli scale, which is available at a village level. So within these 9 earthquake affected districts, we exploited the variation across villages, variation of earthquake intensity across villages. So this is the kind of the variation that we exploited in the study. Into the map, so you can see these are the 9 affected districts. I'm sorry, this is not very clear. And so to the right, these are the 34 PSUs, primary sampling units selected. And this big map at the bottom shows, variation of earthquake intensity at PSU level. So as you can see that there is sort of significant or substantial variation across these PSUs. So to understand the impact, so this very simple model that we use, which is ordinary least squares method, because I do not worry much about endogeneity of the earthquake intensity variation, earthquake intensity variable EQV. So I suppose that it is orthogonal to our this error term, and this YIV here is the value of productive assets damage. So what we do is that we look these productive assets separately, as well as in we kind of take a total value of productive assets as well. So, and then this alpha 1 would give you the impact of the earthquake on the damages of productive assets. And for the assets convergence, we kind of exploited this equation, as you can see it. So GHJ is growth of assets before and after the earthquake. And to the right hand side, APBJ, this is initial level of assets that the household had before that the earthquake happened. So gamma 1, this would basically give you the assets convergence. This would basically test the hypothesis whether assets growth is convergent towards equilibrium or not. For example, if it is negative and significant, we can say that.
Dr. Raut, just want to tell you, like, you have 4 minutes for you
to
wrap up your presentation. Thank you.
So yeah, thank you very much for that. So if it is negative and significant, so we could say that yes, the growth of assets is convergent. And finally, to look into assets protection, we kind of use this equation. So RIV is order response category. So we kind of ask the household to sort of rank their, or we sort of ask them whether they consider themselves as completely recovered or partially recovered or not recovered. So these are the 3 order responses that we had. So we use ordered probability model, and at the right-hand side, this interaction term between earthquake intensity and assets protection strategy, particular assets protection strategy, would suggest whether this particular strategy was effective or not for the recovery of the households. So descriptive analysis. So I didn't show the descriptive analysis by highly affected villages and less affected villages. So I just will give you the glimpse of glimpse of this effect on these 9 affected districts basically. So if you could see this, I also included houses in here, though house I do not consider as we do not consider it as a productive assets, particularly in rural households. So from renting out perspective, vis-a-vis rural urban households. So but I just give this for the information purpose only. So if you look all in all, what we can see is that the value of productive assets, the difference in the total value of productive assets is positive and significant, so indicating that there is some sort of positive recovery of the household, though the magnitude is not very high, so it's like 13,628.44 rupees. Let me move on to the recovery, self-reported recovery. So you could see that 52% household reported complete recovery in all affected districts, and around 47% households reported partial recovery. And when we disaggregate this, when we analyze this village-wise, we could see that only about 47% reported complete recovery, whereas 52% reported partial recovery.
Dr. Raut, you just have less than 2 minutes. I just want to make sure we follow the time structure, and if you can wrap up with your 5 main results, that would be great.
Okay, so these are the assets protection strategies that household resorted to. So if you can, borrowing was the highest, and informal borrowing, out of this borrowing, informal borrowing 55%, and formal borrowing 28%, and remittances, sale of livestock, sale of household and land. Okay, I want to skip this because I already talked about the descriptive analysis. So the impact of the earthquake on productive assets, we see that there is significant impact on crops, cattle, and poultry. So the assets recovery equation, you can see that the coefficient on initial level of productive assets is negative and significant, indicating that assets growth path is convergent. So assets protection strategy, like, as you could see that we find that there is significant sort of effect of remittances. So this is particularly an interaction between remittances and remittances and earthquake intensity, and we see that the remittance is the only highly significant strategy, assets protection strategy that household resorted to for partial recovery. And we also find some evidence of aid and relief and borrowing as effective strategies for partial recovery. So no single strategies for complete recovery. So I don't want to repeat this again. So to conclude, so from policy perspective, I think that it would be good if we provide some space in policies and guidelines, disaster related policies and disaster risk reduction related policies and guidelines, so that it would expedite the recovery process. And we could see that there is a limited role of relief, aid and recovery. So I think there's some sort of inequitable distribution of aid and relief. So that is why there might have been, less effective to, for recovery of the productive assets, and limited role of borrowing, maybe because the cost of borrowing is high, and they are, as you can see, that they are borrowing mostly from the informal sources, wherein the cost of borrowing would be really high. So in that ground, also the government can intervene with subsidized loan, and subsidy on maybe on premium for the insurance that they pay for. Okay, with that, I want to stop here, and I would love to take questions if you have any.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Raut. And I can see actually a comment, very nice comment, and actually suggestions from Dr. Vishen Ramaji. You can see his comment. He's actually guiding you in a couple of papers that you can look into, in fact, 2 or 3 papers. And I think that would be helpful, especially
Sure.
when you're looking at the human and social capital recovery from the Nepal earthquake. So Dr.
Sure,
Raut,
I'll
can take note of those papers.
Okay, yeah, I can see them, so I'll just note it down.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just looking at the time. What I'm thinking, maybe I will invite our last presenter, and then if we have time, we can take questions for, in fact, not only for the last presenter, but for everybody else. Okay, so I will try to invite our. Thank you, Dr. Raut. I'll try to invite our last presenter for this session, Dr. Bhubaneswor Dhakal. His topic is Nepali Diasporas Need Different Stand on Global Initiative for Upscaling Forest Resources and Ecological Restoration. So Dr. Dhakal, okay, thank you for sharing your screen. And yeah, you can start your presentation. And 12 minutes, okay? Just want to make sure. Yeah, we cannot hear you, Dr. Dhakal. I don't know whether you are.
Namaste, I am Bhubaneswor Dhakal I am currently in New Zealand. My topic is Nepali diaspora needs a different stand on global policy initiative for upscaling forest resource and ecological restoration, because this is the era. Many international organizations, they are asking for increased forest and increased ecological situation. But what is the stand from the Nepali perspective? And I would like to present the international forest policy and its land grabbing in Nepal. And then I will talk about what are the problems we are getting, and then I will focus what is the forest in the mountain community context, and what is the way for what are the solutions to address those current problems. And there are many international policy, community forest policy, that is also not real driven for Nepal. It is driven by external agency, protected area development policy, forest carbon trade policy, landscape scale decarbonization policy, upscaling protected area to 30% of national territory by 2030. And currently they have started the UN decade of upscaling forest and ecological restoration. And forest carbon sequestration policy in community-based forest, and the community forest development initially was introduced to support community to increase the forest material or forest product and services to meet the community needs, and that was and reduce the soil erosion. That was the initial propaganda and concept, but when it was implemented, we found they were implemented other way, and the impact is other way in the community. So that's we investigated why it happened, and we are publishing one paper. I would like to go to that. But what we found that the community forest was introduced to reduce livestock population for greenhouse gas emission reduction, and they increase the forest for carbon sequestration. And recently the government, they has made policy to enrich the forest carbon in all community forest in most of the districts, and they have traded some carbon. For example, they traded carbon with World Bank, and recently in the recent Glasgow summit, they traded carbon to the lower emission by accelerating forest finance of the forest carbon of 3 districts. And you see, this is the initially it was the community pasture land, and they converted into pine forest, and this all the livestock they are displaced, and the forest is used for carbon sequestration. Is forest carbon trade is profitable land use? That is my question, and in my assessment, no. In community-based forest, where forests are means of food security, agrobiodiversity security, local employment security, and social security. If it was profitable, why developed countries are buying it from Nepal instead of buying in their vast area? Look at Switzerland government has paid farmers to keep on livestock grazing practice in forest, protecting mountain heritage and biodiversity. Australian government has leased 338 million hectares of land, over 40% of land area for livestock grazing. The government, US government authority has leased 155 acres of public land for industrial livestock production. And look at in Nepal, the farmer has a small area. The average land forest area holding for community forest is 0.74, and average private land holding of farmers in Nepal is 0.7, and more than 60% have less than 0.5 hectares. But if you look at those countries, they have Switzerland have 16 hectares, Australia have 4,331 hectares per farm, and USA has 170 hectares. And there are more interesting facts about the forest carbon trading. Most forests are communal orchard to manage product and services for meeting daily needs, daily household needs in Nepal. And the forest resource should be managed sometime in high, sometime in low, because we need to adjust according to need of the community. But if you look at the carbon side, the carbon sequestration mostly involves increasing tree stock, which lock the land for other economic uses. And the forest carbon sale is not like selling orange crop or rice crop of a season. The sold quantity of carbon must be kept safely on the forest side for indefinitely. Otherwise, it makes no sense for climate change mitigation. And the trade agreement compromises national sovereignty to use the resource for best benefit of nation. That's why India is strongly opposed to lock the forest for carbon sequestration in Earth Summit 1992, so did in recent climate summit. And another area, another land grabbing in Nepal by international agencies is protected area. You can see the in this map, the north area, they are green. They are protected area. And this area, in reality, the species of that area are not endangered as they are in lower belt, but they converted all those national area in the high altitude, mostly around the high Himalayan mountain. That is because this is the special interest of Western society, Western tourist or Western country to protect to make the wilderness area and for their recreational interest, because they would like to wander there, push their wild interest there. That's why they converted that is, and it has affected many biodiversity in that area that need the economically important biodiversity, because in that area the biodiversity can be protected, because in this is high remote area, they can escape and there are less human activity, but that is a vested interest to introduce. And another, you can see This figure 4 shows zone to implement international policy of landscape scale decarbonization. And the objective of this policy is to reduce forest-based livestock grazing and increase forest stock. And if you look the decarbonization policy of international level, Paris Climate Accord 2015 has allowed emission concession on farming, because farming is the activity of producing foods and supporting life of people. So they have given concession, and developed countries have not introduced this adverse policy for agriculture. Any change so far volunteer or driven by incentive, but in Nepal different. And here I'm looking at how the protected area has affected or did land grabbing in Nepal. If you look the global average, less than 15%. If you look at India, less than 6%, and China, less than 18%. But Nepal currently 28%, and it has the last year, the only government, they have declared that they will increase 30% by 2030. And if you look at the ground level, this increasing protected area has rather hampered mountain biodiversity.
Bhubaneswor, Doctor, I just want to tell you, like, you have less than 4 minutes for your presentation. If you can wrap up, that will be great. Thank you.
Okay. Forest has contributed, this policy has reduced economic contribution. It had exacerbated food security problem and other problems. And Nepal is importing forest instead of, and household needs are decreasing. That's why it has many other adverse impacts that we cannot account here. And why ecological restoration is counterproductive in Nepal, I would like to highlight, because most of the part of Nepal are geoecologically sensitive, fragile, so that mountain community traditionally adopted only small area of land for privatized small area land, and they keep most of the land for community multi-purpose use. And that's why Nepal has mixed landscape and small private holding. Look at, you can see forest and farming mixed landscape. And now we need to protect those forests and trees to support our indigenous system and support our livelihood. And if the forests are already overstuck in the forest, that is counterproductive. If we do further ecological restoration, it will hamper the space and productive environment for our economic use, because Nepal needs production-oriented forest, and it should be moderately open space forest for producing multiple products and services. But in Nepal, they are doing intact forest management. And we need this multi-purpose use forest and open forest for many purposes. It has dismantled many communities. You cannot see they have the Russian policy dismantled many high priority social groups. And there are many problems. They are externally induced at community level, policy level, and people's behavior level. That's why my conclusion is natural-based solution is a way forward for reducing carbon emission from economic activity and adapting climate change. The forest resource-based livestock is an engine of sustainable farming and economic in this mountain region. The farming requires multiple production forestry. Increasing such forest product require moderately open space production environment. And climate forest policy and ecological restoration is a counterproductive solution for biodiversity conservation in the mountain and greenhouse gas emission reduction in mountain. So, but unfortunately, the government bureaucrat and other executive elite, by following advice and funding of international agencies, have promoted such counterproductive forest land policy. And here, and some of our Nepali diaspora from working in from different regions, they are making organization, and they would like to increase restore forestry in Nepal, and they would like to do work on ecological restoration. That is very counterproductive. That is against the well-being of Nepali community, based on my experience, work experience, and exposure. And that's why my last conclusion is Nepali diaspora requires challenging the work of this actor, and based on their intellectuality and work experience of overseas. Thank you for attending my presentation. There may be many issues, and you want to clarify, because I have seen the problem different perspective than what you have thought about on the forest. Thank you.
And thank you, Bhubaneswor Dhakal, for your presentation. I'm just looking at the time. We might, we have only a couple of minutes, but yeah, I'm looking also at the chat area. There is a question for you. Let me just read out that question. Do you please shed some lights on opportunities and challenges of Nepal's community forestry or restoring global forestry as a whole? I think for your last slide, you tried to cover those, but maybe you can just touch base some of the two or three key points.
Pardon, I didn't get you through.
Oh, okay. The question I'm just reading, like maybe a broader question, however, do you please shed some lights on opportunities and challenges of Nepal's community forestry or restoring global forestry as a whole?
Yeah, basically here, but I still I could not read any. Is there any question I can read from anywhere?
It is in the chat area. You can check, or I can. Do you want me to read it again?
The environment conservation domain reference India.
I think it's from Ghanshyam Khanal.
Okay.
And there's some information from Dr. Medani Bhandari, that related with.
I could not get through your question, but what I understood is, if you look the problem, first we need to look for ourselves, our community, because the forestry context in Nepal is quite different from the context of the global, because we are in most of our community living in the mountain region, and from the mountain limitation problem of mountain, we have civilized our agriculture and our forestry system are developed different way than the other country, and I have not shared the land use data here. If you see, that is very terrible. That Nepal first need to give priority for the people who are suffering because in the mountain community, because of too much forest and too much conservation, Nepal has suffered. And then to adapt to the situation of climate change, we need to change our forestry system. It is counterproductive recently, and we need to. You can contribute for the global, but if you cannot survive yourself, if you cannot protect yourself, how can you contribute to others? That is my first priority.
Okay. Thank you. So, for your response, and I can see that we just have less than 10 seconds, and we'll be taken to our main room. And I want to thank everybody for your presentation, all the paper presenters.